Coming up, Seoul and Washington agree to step up pressure on North Korea to further seal off its access to funds following Pyongyang's recent threats to conduct yet another nuclear test. Samsung Electronics second quarter earnings beat analysts' forecasts, hitting the best in 2 years on the back of robust sales for its Galaxy S7 smartphones. And the U.S. Federal Reserve keeps its key rate steady for now, but opens the door to rate hikes later this year, saying the risks to the economy have diminished. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Thursday, July 28th here in Seoul. You're tuned into our midday newscast. Thanks for joining us. I'm Hwang Ji-hye. Malta has become the first European country to effectively deport North Korean workers amid growing concerns about Pyongyang's use of forced labor in Europe. Oh Jung-hee has our top story.
According to Maltese government sources who spoke to Yonhap News, some 20 North Koreans working in local construction sites and clothing factories left the country in May after local authorities refused to extend their immigration visas that had expired. The local companies that employed the workers' leisure clothing and rice mix have confirmed the workers are gone. The measure comes amid several reports about the hundreds of North Koreans working as state-sponsored slaves in Europe to earn foreign currency for the communist regime. The South Korean government and human rights groups have claimed that the workers are toiling under long hours and abusive treatment, with 2/3 of their wages taken away by the communist regime. 3 North Korean workers have reportedly disappeared from their workplaces in Malta in the past year, all considered to have defected to South Korea. 2 escaped from a Pyongyang-run restaurant in Malta last year, and 1 from a local construction site. Among EU member countries, Malta is considered to have the closest ties to North Korea, with diplomatic relations stretching back to 1971. In related news, Hong Kong's Mingpao newspaper reported on Thursday that an 18-year-old North Korean man who participated in the International Mathematical Olympiad held in Hong Kong recently asked the Korean Consulate General in Hong Kong for political asylum. He is currently under temporary protection. The consulate has not yet issued a comment on the situation. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
Seoul and Washington have agreed to come up with a much stronger and more efficient tool in the coming months to cut off cash flows into North Korea. That's according to South Korea's Deputy National Security Advisor Cho Tae-yong after talks with U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Tony Blinken in Washington. In an interview with Seoul-based Yonhap News on Wednesday, Cho said South Korea and the U.S. share the belief that the North is ready to conduct a nuclear test at any time. And when it does, the two allies plan to put together another UN resolution with much more powerful sanctions. Cho said that while the current UN sanctions are the strongest yet, there are ways to further strengthen them. Now, the final statement from the ASEAN Regional Forum that took place in Laos also shows support for the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, with representatives expressing concerns about Pyongyang's provocations. The THAAD deployment to South Korea, however, was not included. Kwon So-ah was there.
The joint statement, which represents all 27 members' opinion, includes several regional and security matters, of which one issue is of particular interest to South Korea: North Korea's nuclear and missile threats. A whole paragraph under a section titled Highlights of Discussions on Regional and International Issues deals with the current situation on the Korean Peninsula, expressing the representatives' concern over the North's violations against the international community. The North's 4th nuclear test in January, its missile launch a month later, and a recent one conducted earlier this month have been specifically mentioned, which was not the case in last year's statement. The statement also urged countries to comply with UN Security Council sanctions and called on members to create an environment in which the long-stalled 6-party denuclearization talks can be resumed. Meanwhile, an official said Seoul's foreign ministry has checked with high-ranking Laotian government officials whether this really is the final statement, as it was not only released faster than expected, but also 3 days earlier than last year. Earlier, officials said that it's not looking to be easy to get every single ARF member's stance on paper. That's especially due to conflicts on issues such as the South China Sea dispute, which was a hot issue at this year's meeting. The statement expressed members' concerns over escalation on the maritime conflict and said that actions which could further complicate the situation should be avoided. What's worth mentioning is that the U.S. deployment of the missile defense system THAAD, which was said to have been on China's early draft, was not included. Evaluating the statement, a South Korean official said Wednesday that most countries have sent a strong message to North Korea during the ARF meeting and that South Korea, US, Japan and Australia's firm cooperation have helped reaching a satisfying result. Hwon-soa, Arirang News, Vientiane.
Korean tech giant Samsung Electronics has seen its quarterly operating profit rise to a 2-year high, largely propelled by stellar sales in its smartphone division. Shin Se-min reports.
Samsung Electronics has released its forecast-beating quarterly earnings report, which shows its operating profit in the April to June period jumped 18% from the year before to 8.1 trillion won, or $7.17 billion. Sales rose 5% to $45 billion, slightly higher than a preliminary earnings announcement, while its quarterly earnings rose 2% from a year earlier. Considering that Samsung's mobile division accounts for more than half of its revenue and profit, the recent popularity of its Galaxy S7 smartphone and mid to low-end product lineup have worked as a strategy to boost its entry to the world's overly saturated smartphone market. The company's smartphone sector reported an operating profit of $3.8 billion in Q2, and industry trackers project the South Korean company had sold some 26 million units of the newly released smartphone since it hit shelves in March. It's a stark contrast to its rival Apple, which reported a 15% drop in quarterly sales due to slowing demand for the iPhones. The South Korean company is hoping to prolong its solid sales in the third quarter with the launch of the Galaxy Note 7, the latest version of its large-screen flagship smartphone. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
A foundation for comfort women funded by the Japanese government opened in Seoul on Thursday with a mission to compensate Korean women who were sexually enslaved by the Japanese military during World War II. The foundation is the result of an agreement reached between Seoul and Tokyo last December to settle their long-standing diplomatic dispute over the issue. The Japanese government offered an apology for its actions and promised over $9 million in compensation to the women through the establishment of the foundation. The organization will look to compensate the surviving victims directly as well as finance commemorative works, but according to Japanese media outlets, both governments are still discussing the details of the deal, so the funds will not be transferred until at least August. Over in the U.S., President Barack Obama is making the case for Hillary Clinton in a highly anticipated speech at the Democratic Party's nominating convention. In his remarks, he is expected to highlight her qualifications and link her historic candidacy to his legacy. Our Hwang Ho-jun reports.
She was his rival when he was running for the White House, and later became the woman he made his Secretary of State. The woman is Hillary Clinton, and President Barack Obama is expected to make a strong case for her presidential bid on the third night of the Democratic Party's nominating convention in Philadelphia. Obama's speech has garnered a great deal of attention as it will be one of the last major addresses of his presidency. He also has a tough act to follow after his wife brought down the House with a powerful speech of her own on the first day of the convention. According to excerpts of the speech released by the White House ahead of the event, Obama is expected to say that, quote, "I can say with confidence there has never been a man or woman more qualified than Hillary Clinton to serve as President of the United States of America." Vice President Joe Biden also graced the occasion to deliver forceful remarks in support of Clinton's nomination. Virginia Senator Tim Kaine also got his first introduction to a national viewing audience as he accepted the nomination as Clinton's running mate. Before the big speeches, the night had witnessed some emotional moments as survivors and family members of the victims of 4 different mass shootings took the stage to call for stronger gun control laws. Gun control, which has been one of the most divisive issues in the U.S., has been one of the tenets of Clinton's presidential campaign. On Tuesday, Clinton became the first woman to represent a major political party in the race for the White House. Just after the nomination was made official, Clinton made an appearance via satellite to thank her supporters for helping her make history.
What an incredible honor that you have given me. And I can't believe we just put the biggest crack in that glass ceiling yet.
The world will get to hear her official acceptance speech on Thursday. Hwang Woo-jun, Arirang News.
The U.S. Federal Reserve has kept its interest rate unchanged, but the policymaking committee members offered a more upbeat outlook on the economy, fueling expectations for Fed tightening that could come as early as September. Park Jong-hong has the details.
The Federal Reserve has decided to stay the course. It has left interest rates unchanged, but also left the door open to a rate hike later in the year, saying near-term risks to the economic outlook have diminished. In a statement Wednesday following its policy-setting meeting overnight, the Federal Open Market Committee kept its benchmark interest rate in the 0.25 to 0.5% range. The U.S. Central Bank indicated that the economy had expanded at a moderate rate and job gains were strong in June. Analysts say the global slowdown, financial market volatility, and uncertainty over the impact of Brexit have repeatedly prompted the Fed to delay a rate hike. There are 3 more Fed policy meetings remaining this year, in September, November, and December. However, a rate hike in November is not seen as likely because the meeting takes place just a week before the U.S. presidential election. The Fed has kept interest rates unchanged ever since the last hike in December last year. Park Jong-hong, Arirang News.
The International Monetary Fund has once again urged Korea to limit its intervention in the foreign exchange market. In its 2016 external sector report released on Wednesday, it said Korea's foreign reserves have gradually increased from 2009 to mid-2014 and have since remained stable. The IMF then added that the Korean government should limit foreign exchange intervention to the extent of correcting excessive market volatility. The international body has repeatedly warned Seoul against aggressive involvement, but the government has denied these accusations. The IMF says as of June, the Korean won had depreciated by 4% against last year's average in terms of its real effective exchange rate weighted against a basket of other major currencies. Pope Francis says that the recent series of gruesome attacks in Europe and around the globe show that the world is at war, but denied that it was a religious one. The pontiff made the remarks on Wednesday as he was on his way to Krakow, Poland, to celebrate World Youth Day. He told reporters the war is not one of religious, but a war of interests, a war for money and the domination of peoples. He said religions don't want war and that all religious faiths pray for peace. The Pope's 5-day visit to Poland comes just a day after the killing of an elderly priest in northern France, which has added to the security fears and growing anti-Muslim sentiment in Europe. Speaking at the event in Krakow, the Pope called on Poles to respect the complex phenomenon of migration that calls for great wisdom and compassion. The government has pulled the final plug on leading mobile carrier SK Telecom's bid to buy top cable TV operator CJ HelloVision. The Ministry of Science, ICT and Future Planning, which was heading the evaluation of what would have been one of the country's biggest M&As this year, made this announcement on Thursday. It follows the country's antitrust watchdog's decision last week to reject the bid due to monopoly concerns. The merger required approval from 3 government bodies, including the Fair Trade Commission, and given the FTC's ruling, the Science Ministry's decision did not come as a surprise. Korea has ranked 32nd out of 130 countries on a global ranking for human capital. On the World Economic Forum's Human Capital Index for this year, Korea received a score of 76.89, dropping the nation to 32nd from 30th in the previous year. The index measures a country's ability to use its human capital by studying its education level, employment, and workforce dynamics. In terms of education, Korea ranked second in the world for its high tertiary enrollment rate, but perceptions that companies have about the overall quality of the education system were much lower, placing the country at 59th. Korea was also ranked comparatively low in its labor force participation rate due to a large gender gap. Finland, Norway, and Switzerland secured the top 3 spots in this year's report. And that's all we have for now. Thank you for watching. I'm Hwang Jie. We will be back throughout the day with more newscasts. Goodbye for now.